Little Miss Giggles and the New Job by Roger Hargreaves. Are you ready? Let's take a look.
Say, Wicked.
Can you guess what little Miss Giggles does every morning when she wakes up? Yes, that's right. She giggles. And it's the same story all day, every day. The tiniest things makes her giggle and giggle. Some people love little Miss Giggles giggling. But some don't. Little Miss Greedy, for instance. I'm sure you can imagine what little Miss Giggles did when she saw little Miss Greedy eating an enormous cake. She giggled, of course. Little Miss Greedy thought that little Miss Giggles was giggling at her, but in fact, little Miss Giggles was just giggling about her new job. On that particular day, little Miss Giggles was even happier than usual because she was starting a new job as a waitress in a very smart restaurant at the golf course. "Do not forget," said the manager in a very important voice, "this is an undeniably, extraordinarily, impressively fancy restaurant. The service must be impeccably perfect." And what did little Miss Giggles do when she heard these words? She giggled, of course. Her first customer was Mr. Grumble. "Oh, at last," grumbled Mr. Grumble, when little Miss Giggles came to take his order. And of course, as usual, she couldn't keep a straight face. It was the same when she brought him his food. She just couldn't help giggling. Mr. Grumble was not at all pleased. "And what do you find so very funny?" he asked crossly. "Are you giggling at me? I must speak to the manager right away." I'm here at your service, Mr. Grumble," said the manager impeccably politely. "Your waitress is giggling at me," grumbled Mr. Grumble. "In fact, she won't stop giggling." "Please accept our most serious and sincere apologies," replied the manager. "I can assuredly assure you that it won't happen again." Giggled little Miss Giggles. "Little Miss Giggles," said the manager importantly, "Mr. Grumble is one of our most difficult customers. Therefore, please do not giggle in front of him." "But I'm not giggling at him," explained little Miss Giggles. "I'm just giggling because I'm so very happy and such a big giggler." "Let me give you a different job," said the manager. "Please take these strings out to the golfers and do try to be seriously serious and sensible." Little Miss Giggles promised to do her best. Do you think she would be able to be seriously serious and sensible? Mr. Snooty had just hit a very good ball. That is to say, he had hit a normal golf ball very well. The ball was right next to the hole. "Ah, good shot, Mr. Snooty," said Mr. Happy. "Not bad, I agree," said Mr. Snooty. "But I know I can do better. On my next shot, the ball will go straight in the hole." But this next shot did not go well. He missed. And at that moment, little Miss Giggles arrived with the drinks, happily giggling to herself. "I must speak to the manager at once," cried Mr. Snooty. And no sooner had he spoken than the manager arrived. "This young person has made me look ridiculous in front of my friends," said Mr. Snooty rudely. "In fact, it is entirely her fault that I have lost the game." "Please accept our most serious and sincere apologies," said the manager once again. "I can assuredly assure you that it won't happen again." And that was why little Miss Giggles was sent to work in the golf club shop. And in the shop, little Miss Splendid and little Miss Bossy were trying on some truly ridiculous hats. I don't need to tell you what little Miss Giggles did next. "We must find the manager at once," shouted little Miss Bossy bossily, dragging little Miss Splendid away with her. "I'm tremendously, terribly sorry," explained the manager, "but I'm undeniably unable to let you work here any longer." But even with this bad news, little Miss Giggles couldn't stop giggling. "Do you think she'll be able to find another job?" On her way home, little Miss Giggles walked past the nursery. She could hear that the babies there weren't giggling. They were crying, sobbing, and bawling. What a terrible noise! The poor lady, who was in charge of all those crying babies, wasn't giggling either. She was wondering how she could cheer them all up. Little Miss Giggles walked into the nursery, giggled at the babies, and, as if by magic, they stopped crying. In fact, they started to smile and laugh and giggle back at little Miss Giggles. This time, little Miss Giggles had found the perfect job. And ever since then, little Miss Giggles is happier than ever when she wakes up in the morning. At last, she has found a job where the giggliest giggles aren't always her own. See? So she could find a job. Ah, this was a fun story, wasn't it? Don't forget, be good for Mummy and Daddy. Mr. Strong Looks for a Job by Roger Hargreaves. Let's take a look. Mr. Strong was the strongest person you've ever met, but he had a problem. He was too strong for any job. If he washed a car, all the paint would rub off. If he painted a house, the house would fall down. He was much too strong. But that morning, Mr. Strong had at last found a job that sounded just right for him. Zookeeper, and he could start next week. On Monday, Mr. Strong was put in charge of cleaning the monkey cage. He scrubbed and rubbed and brushed some more. The monkeys giggled as they watched him work. But he brushed so hard that, snap, the handle of the brush broke. "Oops," said Mr. Strong. The monkeys laughed more than ever. On Tuesday, Mr. Strong was put in charge of feeding the penguins. He drove the tractor straight into the water. "Sorry," called Mr. Strong to the surprised penguins. On Wednesday, Mr. Strong was put in charge of the panda. Do you think he used the door to get into the cage? Not at all. He stretched the bars off the cage and simply walked straight in. Easy. But seeing his chance, the panda ran towards the gap in the bars and, with a big smile on his face, he escaped. "Sorry," said Mr. Strong. On Thursday, Mr. Strong was not put in charge of any animals. He was put in charge of selling ice cream. What could possibly go wrong? Ice cream cornets are small, and ice cream cornets are not very strong. "Oops, I'm so sorry," said Mr. Strong to his sticky customers. On Friday, Mr. Strong was put in charge of the washing up, but the plates didn't last for long. Crash! "Oh dear, I can't do anything right," said Mr. Strong. Without a doubt, Mr. Strong was just too strong. Perhaps the zoo wasn't the place for him. But on Saturday, Mr. Strong was given a job that, for once, really used his strength. lifting the baby elephant into his bath. Like all babies, the elephant loved taking a bath, and he even had a rubber duck to play with. The head zookeeper was delighted. "Well done, Mr. Strong. This job is perfect for you. I have an idea." Now, Mr. Strong comes to the zoo every Saturday to bath the baby elephant and sometimes even the mummy and daddy elephants. But juggling the elephant is strictly forbidden. I hope you enjoyed this story. Bye-bye. Little Miss Helpful at the Fair by Roger Hargreaves. Let's take a look. Little Miss Helpful was spending the day at the fair. I expect you like fairs, don't you? Little Miss Helpful did. There are so many fun things to do at the fair. But what Little Miss Helpful liked to do best of all was to help other people. So she looked around the fair for someone who might need her help. She stopped by Mr. Fussy, the candy floss seller. He had a question for her. "I need to ask for your help, Little Miss Helpful. Could you look after my stall for a while? I completely forgot to change my goldfish's water this morning," he said, "and that will never do." "Don't you worry," said Little Miss Helpful. "I am happy to help." A moment later, Little Miss Splendid arrived. She had made a special effort for the fair and was looking particularly splendid. "Good morning, Little Miss Helpful," she said. "I wish to buy a candy floss to match the colour of my hat. It's such a stylish hat, don't you agree?" "Happy to help," said Little Miss Helpful. She pressed the button to switch the candy floss machine on. Brrr! The candy floss grew and grew and grew like a big pink cloud. But the cloud was getting too big for the machine. It puffed out over the edges and... Little Miss Splendid found herself completely covered in sticky pink candy floss. She was not pleased. Her hat was ruined. She was not pleased at all. "Oh, I am so terribly sorry," said Little Miss Helpful, and in a terrible state of confusion she ran away, leaving poor Little Miss Splendid more stuck up than ever before. Next, Little Miss Helpful went to the shooting gallery. Little Miss Helpful at the shooting gallery? That doesn't sound like a very good idea, does it? I think there might be another problem before too long. But at the moment, Little Miss Helpful noticed a very strange sight indeed. Mr. Lazy, the balloon seller, had fallen asleep. Mr. Lazy had not only fallen asleep, but he had also floated up into the sky, no doubt dreaming beautiful blue sky dreams. But his dreams would soon be over. Little Miss Helpful didn't hesitate for a second. She picked up an air rifle and pow, pow, pow! Pop, pop, pop! One by one, Mr. Lazy's colourful balloons popped. Pop, pop, pop! For once, Mr. Lazy was wide awake. There was a big crash. Mr. Lazy had fallen to the ground, thanks to the help of Little Miss Helpful. She had only wanted to help, but look what had happened. Poor Mr. Lazy went home, rubbing his poor bruised bottom. To cheer herself up, Little Miss Helpful went to the food stall. All the best cooks in town had prepared food for the fair. "Go and get me some bowls and cups, Little Miss Helpful," ordered Little Miss Bossy, "and I hope that for once you won't cause any trouble." But of course, Little Miss Helpful wanted to be as helpful as she possibly could, so she decided to carry as many bowls and cups as she possibly could. Well, couldn't, in fact. The huge pile of cups and bowls wobbled this way and that. It was tipping dangerously. "Where are those bowls?" asked little Miss Bossy impatiently. "What on earth is going on? I didn't ask you to do a dance as well." Poor little Miss Helpful was finding it so hard to keep her balance. She was dancing this way and that, trying to keep everything from landing in a heap on the floor. But alas, 1 bowl, 2 bowls, 10 bowls. All the bowls and cups tumbled down around little Miss Bossy and broke into 1,000 pieces. And who do you think landed in the middle of the table with all the food? Little Miss Helpful, of course. "Yum! That's the best potato salad I've ever tasted," said little Miss Helpful. "You must give me the recipe." Everyone burst out laughing. Even little Miss Bossy. And what do you think was the most popular attraction at the fair that day? Why, little Miss Helpful's Cups and Bowls dancing act, of course. I hope you enjoyed this book. Bye-bye. Mr. Tickle in a Tangle by Roger Hargreaves. Let's take a look. Now, who does that extraordinary long arm belong to? Of course, Mr. Tickle. And Mr. Tickle's long arms come in very handy. They can reach kites caught in trees. But most importantly, they are splendidly perfect for tickling people around corners. Tickling people through upstairs windows. And even tickling people on the other side of letterboxes. However, there are days when those extraordinarily long arms are not so handy. Days when they are nothing but a nuisance. Days like last Monday, Mr. Tickle was lying in bed eating breakfast when he heard his garden gate open. It was Mr. Stamp, the postman. Quick as a flash, Mr. Tickle sent one of his long arms down the stairs to tickle Mr. Stamp. Or that is what he intended to do, but somehow or other his arm got tangled up in the banisters. Poor Mr. Tickle! It took him an hour to untangle his arm. The letter Mr. Stamp had delivered was an invitation from Mr. Snooty for lunch at the Grand Hotel. Mr. Tickle took the bus to town and sat on the upper deck. Mr. Tickle sent one of his long arms down the stairs to tickle the bus driver, but somehow or other the ticket inspector trod on his arm. Ouch! Mr. Tickle arrived at the Grand Hotel and rushed through the revolving door, or rather he tried to, but somehow or other his arms caught in the door. The fire brigade had to be called out to untangle his arms, by which time he had missed lunch. Poor Mr. Tickle! No lunch, and even worse, no tickles. It was a very sad Mr. Tickle who set off for home. Suddenly he heard something. He stopped. Somebody was approaching from around the corner. Mr. Tickle smiled to himself and sent both his arms around the corner to tickle the somebody. But that somebody was a little Miss Naughty, and she tied those extraordinary long arms together in a knot. When he got home, Mr. Tickle fell back into his armchair. What a terrible day! Not one tickle! Suddenly there was a knock at the door. It was little Miss Tiny. Mr. Tickle stretched out one of his extraordinary long arms. Well, one tickle was better than none. even if it was only a tiny tickle. Tickle, tickle. I hope you enjoyed this book. Bye-bye. Little Mkss Lucky and the Naughty Pixies by Roger Hargreaves. Let's take a look. Little Mkss Lucky, as I'm sure you know, is the luckiest person in the world. When she goes out for a walk, she always finds a pound coin lying on the ground. She never gets caught in the rain. And even when things go wrong, she is lucky. The other week, she locked herself out of Horseshoe Cottage, where she lives, and guess who should come round the corner? Mr. Latchkey, the locksmith. However, last week, strange things started to happen to little Mkss Lucky, the sort of things that never normally happen to her. Unlucky things. She walked under a ladder and a pot of paint fell on her head. Splat! When she was walking down the high street, she fell into an open manhole. Bump! And she was passing someone's garden. She was soaked by a sprinkler. Splash! Little Mkss Lucky could not understand what was going on. But have you noticed anything? Have you noticed anyone new nearby when these unlucky things happen? That's right, some small troublemakers are playing tricks on her. And do you know who they are? I'll tell you. They are pixies, very naughty pixies. On her way home, little Mkss Lucky met little Miss Wise and explained to her how she had run out of luck. "I suspect," suggested little Miss Wise, "that is not much a case of bad luck as somebody playing tricks on you. Somebody like Mr. Mischief, for instance." The more little Mkss Lucky thought this over, the more she hoped that little Miss Wise was right. That evening she devised a plan to catch the culprit. She sprinkled flour on the floor round her bed before she went to sleep. In the middle of the night, while little Mkss Lucky was fast asleep, those naughty pixies crept into her house. Their first naughty deed was to swap the sugar in the sugar bowl with the salt in the salt cellar. Then the pixies sneaked upstairs and left the largest alarm clock you have ever seen on little Mkss Lucky's bedside table. Very early the next morning, little Mkss Lucky was rudely awoken by the most awful noise. Clang, 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 rang the giant alarm clock. Little Mkss Lucky's ears were ringing. When she looked down at the floor, there was a trail of flowery footprints for her to follow out of the door and down the stairs. Flowery footprints that were much too small to be Mr. Mischief's. And, as I am sure you can guess, those flowery footprints led little Mkss Lucky all the way to where the pixies lived. The pixies were so surprised and worried at being caught that they promised there and then to never play another trick on little Mkss Lucky. Little Mkss Lucky left feeling very happy, knowing that she was just as lucky as she had always been. When she got home, she made herself a well-earned breakfast, eggs on toast and a pot of tea. She was so busy thinking about the pixies that, without realizing, little Mkss Lucky poured salt in her tea and sugar on her eggs. But you and I know that she didn't, did she? Because of the naughty pixies' nighttime tricks, her breakfast was not spoiled. Now, that's what I call lucky. Have you enjoyed this book? Well, I have. Bye. Little Miss Sunshine Cheers Everyone Up by Roger Hargreaves. Let's take a look. It had been snowing for days and for weeks. Snow covered everything. The sky was grey, the wind was cold, and the sun hadn't been seen for a long time. The roads were blocked, so all the buses were late, and everyone slipped and slid as they went about their business under the grey sky. Little Miss Sunshine was the only person who was still cheerful. "What a beautiful morning," she said to Mr. Stem the postman. "Morning, little Miss Sunshine," shivered the poor frozen postman. Plop! A big lump of snow slid off the roof and landed right on top of the postman's head. "Brrr! Don't worry," said little Miss Sunshine happily. "It'll soon be spring and the sun will warm you up." "The snow is so beautiful," said little Miss Sunshine as she went for a drive. "Why is everyone so fed up? They should be enjoying themselves. I must find a way to make them smile again." The first person she met was Mr. Worry. "I'm very worried," he said. "How can I get about with all this snow? I'm worried that I will have to stay in the house all day." "Take this sledge," said little Miss Sunshine, "and do try to stop worrying." "Oh, thank you," said Mr. Worry, smiling. "This is marvellous." And off he slid. Mr. Greedy was also worried about the weather. "When this snow melts, my house will be flooded, and what will become of all my stores of food? Everything will be ruined." "If your house is flooded," replied little Miss Sunshine, "you'll be able to sail around your house in a fishing boat and catch fish for tea. Just imagine, fish and chips. How delicious!" "Fish and chips, my favourite," said Mr. Greedy, grinning. The next person little Miss Sunshine met was little Miss Splendid. "Oh me, oh my!" exclaimed little Miss Splendid. "My splendid hat will be ruined." "But, little Miss Splendid," said little Miss Sunshine, "the icicles shine like your eyes. They are utterly splendid." "Do you really think so?" smiled little Miss Splendid, delighted by the flattery. Little Miss Sunshine realized that it was going to take her a long time to cheer everyone up one by one, but she had a plan. She asked her good friend Mr. Tickle to help her. From up on the rooftop, they spied on all their grumpy friends. Things were getting worse and worse. Mr. Tickle reached down his extraordinary long arms and everyone burst out laughing. And that's when the snowball fight began. Soon the grey sky and the cold wind were forgotten. Mr. Bump, who was forever falling over, was grinning an enormous grin. "I can fall in the snow and not hurt myself at all," he cried. Little Miss Late, who was always late for everything, found a very quick way of getting around. Everyone thanked little Miss Sunshine and Mr. Tickle for teaching them how to enjoy the snow. So remember, next time you are cold and the sky is grey, don't be fed up because somebody might just reach down from above and... you! I hope you enjoyed this book. Don't forget, be good for Mummy and Daddy. Bye-bye. Little Miss Naughty Worries Mr. Worry by Roger Hargreaves. Let's take a look. Little Miss Naughty is quite the naughtiest person that I know. Take the other day, for example. She tied Mr. Tall's shoelaces together. And she took Mr. Dizzy into the maze and left him there. and she joined up all the dots on Miss Dotty's house. And she even picked on the worm who lives at the bottom of her garden. I think you would have to agree that she's probably the naughtiest person that you know. Then, one day, little Miss Naughty met Mr. Worry. Now, Mr. Worry is the sort of person who worries about everything, absolutely everything. Let's have some fun, suggested little Miss Naughty, after they had introduced themselves. Mr. Worry was worried that if he said no, he might offend little Miss Naughty, so he said yes. But he was still worried what fun somebody called little Miss Naughty might get up to, and as you have seen, he was right to worry. Little Miss Naughty led him to Mr. Tickle's house. "Let's ring Mr. Tickle's doorbell and run away," she giggled.
"Oh, I don't know," said Mr. Worry. "Mr. Tickle might be in the bath."
"Even better,"
laughed Miss Naughty. "But then he would be all wet, and he might slip, and he might fall down the stairs, and he might bump his head, and then there wouldn't be anybody to call the doctor because we would have run away."
Up to this point, little Miss Naughty had never worried about anything in her entire life. But now, when she thought about what Mr. Worry had said, ringing Mr. Tickle's doorbell and running away suddenly didn't seem such a good idea after all. "Come on," she said, "I've got a better idea." They walked over to Mr. Snooty's house. "Why don't we let his tires down?" chuckled little Miss Naughty. Mr. Worry looked worried.
"But what if Mr. Snooty didn't notice he had flat tires until he got out on the road, and then he might get stuck, and then a fire engine might come along, and it might not be able to get past, and then it couldn't put out the fire," gasped Mr. Worry.
"Oh,"
said little Miss Naughty.
"I hadn't thought of that."
She had thought of something else, though, and off they went. But it didn't matter what she thought up. Mr. Worry could think of something to worry about, which then gave little Miss Naughty something to worry about.
They didn't push Mr. Bounce off the gate because he might have bounced up in a tree and never been able to get down.
They didn't scatter little Miss Scatterbrain's marbles, because she might have got upset if they had been lost. Little Miss Naughty was distraught, all those wonderful naughty ideas going to waste, and then she had another idea, and tripped up Mr. Worry, who fell flat on his face. "What did you do that for?" said Mr. Worry. "I might have rolled down the hill, and I might have fallen in the river, and then I might have caught a cold, and I might have had to stay in bed all week." Little Miss Naughty looked at Mr. Worry.
"But you didn't,"
she said, and ran off, giggling mischievously. Bye-bye.
Mr. Happy Finds a Hobby by Roger Hargreaves. Are you ready? Mr. Happy is a happy sort of fella. He lives in Happyland, which is a happy sort of place. Behind his house there is a wood full of happy birds, and on the other side of the wood there is a lake full of happy fish. Now, one day, not that long ago, Mr. Happy went for a walk down through the wood. As he came to the shore of the lake, he heard an unusual sound, a sound that is seldom heard in Happyland. It was the sound of somebody moaning and grumbling. Mr. Happy peered round the trunk of a tree. At the edge of the lake there was somebody fishing. Fishing and grumbling and fishing. It was Mr. Grumble. "Good morning, Mr. Grumble," said Mr. Happy. "Shh!" shushed Mr. Grumble. "Sorry," whispered Mr. Happy. "Have you caught anything?"
"Yes, I've caught a cold,"
grumbled Mr. Grumble.
"I've been sitting here all night. I hate fishing."
"Then why are you fishing?" asked Mr. Happy.
"Because Mr. Quiet said it was fun, and you see, I'm trying to find something I enjoy doing, something I can do as a hobby."
Pondered Mr. Happy. "I might be able to help. Come on, let's see if we can find your hobby." As they walked along, Mr. Happy thought long and hard, and as he thought, Mr. Grumble grumbled. He grumbled about the noise the birds were making. He grumbled about having to walk. But most of all, he grumbled about not having a hobby. Grumble, grumble, grumble. First of all, they met Mr. Rush in his car. Mr. Happy explained what they were doing.
"What's your hobby?"
asked Mr. Grumble. "Speed," said Mr. Rush. "Hop in." As they did, Mr. Grumble very quickly decided that he did not like going fast. Next, they met Mr. and Miss Giggles.
"What's your hobby?"
asked Mr. Grumble. "I like giggling," giggled Miss Giggles. So they went to the circus to see the clowns. Little Miss Giggles giggled. Mr. Happy laughed, and Mr. Grumble frowned.
"I hate custard pies,"
grumbled Mr. Grumble. It proved to be a very long day for Mr. Happy. They went everywhere. They went to Little Miss Splendid's house, but Mr. Grumble did not like hats. They went to Mr. Mischief's house, but Mr. Grumble did not like practical jokes. They bounced with Mr. Bounce, and they looked through keyholes with Mr. Nosey. But nothing was right. In fact, nothing was left. Mr. Happy had run out of ideas. As the sun was setting, they saw Mr. Impossible coming towards them down the lane. "Now, if anybody can help us, that somebody ought to be Mr. Impossible," said Mr. Happy. "Hello," he said. "You're good at the impossible. Can you think of a hobby that Mr. Grumble would enjoy?" "That," said Mr. Impossible. "Yes," said Mr. Happy and Mr. Grumble together. "Would be impossible," said Mr. Impossible.
"Grrr!"
growled Mr. Grumble and stomped off home. It was whilst drinking a cup of tea the next morning that Mr. Happy had an idea. A perfectly obvious idea. He rushed round to Mr. Grumble's house. "I've got it!" cried Mr. Happy. "You can take up fishing."
"Fishing? But I hate fishing."
"I know, but what do you do while you're fishing?" asked Mr. Happy.
"I don't know."
"You grumble," said Mr. Happy. "And what do you like doing most of all?"
I like
then it dawned on Mr. Grumble.
I like grumbling."
Mr. Grumble looked at Mr. Happy, and then for the first time in a very long time, he smiled. A very small smile, but a smile all the same. I hope you enjoyed this book. Mr. Nosey and the Big Surprise. Let's take a look. Mr. Nosey is the sort of person who does not mind his own business. He minds everyone else's business. He is as nosy as his nose is long. If there is a keyhole to look through or a letterbox to listen at, you'll find Mr. Nosey there looking or listening, and probably both. One day, While Mr. Nosey was taking a walk through the wood on the other side of Tiddletown, he heard a door shut.
That's odd,
he said to himself. Mr. Nosey peered around a tree, and there was a wall that he had never noticed before. Now, Mr. Nosey can't go past a wall without knowing what is on the other side. And rather handily, this wall had a door in it, a small yellow door. Mr. Nosey, being the nosy fellow he is, could not resist taking a look. He opened the door and peered around it. On the other side of the wall was a tiny house with a yellow door. Inside the house was a lift. Mr. Nosey got in the lift and pressed the button. The lift went down and down and down and down for what seemed like a very long time. At the bottom, the lift doors opened onto a long tunnel with a light at the end. Mr. Nosey set off down the tunnel. By this time, Mr. Nosey was very curious. He couldn't wait to see where the tunnel would lead. At the end of the tunnel, there was another small yellow door, and then another tunnel.
There must be something really interesting at the end,
Mr. Nosey said to himself as he hurried along. He came to another door, and then a long, winding staircase, and another tunnel at the top. Mr. Nosey had quite lost track of time, but he felt sure that he was coming close to the end. He finally came to yet another small yellow door, just like all the others, except this one had a keyhole. Mr. Nosey peeked through the keyhole. All he could see was a white room, so he opened the door and there was a white room. Nothing else. No furniture, no carpets, no pictures, just a white room. Mr. Nosey walked into the room. He had never been so disappointed in all his life. He turned to leave, and it was then that he saw a note stuck to the back of the door. And written on the note was, signed Mr. Mischief. Mr. Nosey groaned, and went home the long way. And now you know what to do if you ever discover a small yellow door. Keep walking. I hope you enjoyed this. It made me laugh for sure. Bye-bye.
For watching Storytime with Gita. Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on social media. 1, 2, 3. Read with me. See what's the next book is going to be. Pictures that are work of art, and some books that make you very smart. With words that bounce up off the page, they are good for children of every age. Learn the letters A, B, C, and stories that wow you and me. Grab your books and gather around and listen to Gita read aloud. Sit and enjoy the relaxing tone, and maybe one day you'll write your own. Don't forget to be good for mommy and daddy. Obey, respect, and help them daily. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye for now.